you're not giving up authority or power by inviting ideas.
It can make you a more effective leader when we have more information and we actually listen to our teams. They feel safe enough to give us that feedback.
Absolutely.
Welcome to Teams That Win, a podcast of the LSU Leadership Development Institute, where we get to talk about team science and how leaders can make an impact for complex problems across the state of Louisiana. I'm Lacy Dicharry, your host and Senior Director and Executive Coach of the Leadership Development Institute. Today, I have Natasha Simoneaux. She is our Business and Operations Manager Extraordinaire here from the LDI team. We are going to talk about a topic that is near and dear to our team, I would say. It's called emergent states. So what does that mean?
So this is what's really interesting about team science is you would think if I was to build the perfect team, right? So let me go ahead and get the 5 of the smartest people I know, right? And I'm just going to go ahead and throw them together and say, hey, let's go ahead and solve a problem. The science and the research shows that the people, the individual personalities and resumes that are on that team are less important than how those teams actually interact with each other. And that's what creates those emergent states that actually lead to high-performing teams.
Absolutely, yes. So how do we know that?
So there's been some large-scale studies, such as Google did a study on over 180 teams called Project Aristotle. And they looked at all the different kinds of factors. They were looking at environmental factors. They were looking at leaders on the teams. They were looking at resumes. They were looking at food. I mean,
ping pong,
all kinds of stuff, right?
Pods.
Yeah. What made great teams? Because the assumption was we hire all these amazing people, right? So we should be having amazing teams and amazing results.
Yeah.
But there were actually 5 things that came out of that study, the top 5 things that made highly effective teams. Can you guess what the number 1 thing was?
I know the answer.
You know the answer? What's the answer?
Psychological safety.
Yes, absolutely.
So what is cool about emergent states? So in team science, there are a few different models, but the most straightforward model that I think leaders can really grasp onto is that IMO or that IPO. So there's the inputs, there's the mediators, and there's the outputs. So what does that mean? Inputs are things like leaders, leadership styles, people, skills, resources, right? Goals, clear information, technology. So those are all the inputs that we look at, right? And outputs are the goals that we set. The M or the P in the middle, those are process or mediators. And so one of those most significant ones is emergent states. Psychological safety has emerged in the literature really since Amy Edmondson's seminal article in 1999. And she was the one who was in that kind of background with Google, understanding what is the thing that made the biggest difference in those teams. And so that's how we know psychological safety is number 1. Yeah, it makes teams most effective. Trust is another example of an emergent state that is hugely important. Everybody's heard that quote, everything moves at the speed of trust. And we know that to be true. We know that to be true. If trust is broken down, it is very hard to get any of the outcomes that you want.
So what that means is role clarity. Who's doing what? And do we trust those people to be able to do their role, right? So you have high accountability, you have role clarity, you have process clarity. All of that kind of rolls into the structure and clarity process. And that allows teams to go ahead and function without confusion. So without ambiguity. When you have ambiguity in a team, it erodes trust because it erodes my ability to trust that you're going to follow through on what you say you're going to go ahead and follow through. And it creates risk because of that. Because now I want to go ahead and hold on to more and give you less.
Yeah, it's like that human condition. And humans do this all the time. And it's not on purpose, but we all do it. And we've all been participating in it. And we've all been leaders who have seen our team members do it.
Yeah.
In the absence of clear information, we make up stories. Our brain does it automatically, and it is always doing it in the background. And so part of that, what I'm hearing you say, is that clarity is so important as a baseline for trust.
Early in my career, one of the things that I actually learned from a mentor of mine was to assume good intent. In the absence of clarity,
yes,
and while you're building trust, and while you're asserting accountability as a leader on a team, because from there, then trust can build and accountability can build. And that's those stepping stones, those Lego blocks that you put together to create psychological safety on a team.
Absolutely. And so that's the thing, people in working in plants, people on running car sales teams, working especially construction, healthcare, K-12 education, a lot of people aren't aware of psychological safety because it's not something that you can name, right? Like
Right.
one of the inputs is information sharing or how decisions are made, or those are things that you can clearly delineate. But psychological safety and trust, all of these emergent states that we talk about, it's not really something that's super tangible.
It's more felt.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You either have it or you don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things like you can identify the absence of it or the presence of it without necessarily giving it a name.
Yes.
Yeah.
So one of the things I like talking to leaders that I coach about is what is psychological safety and what are the myths about psychological safety. I think a lot of people assume psychological safety is that everybody feels safe all the time. It's this happy kumbaya place where there's no conflict. And that's actually not at all what psychological safety is.
Correct.
So when we talk about psychological safety, there's several indicators. And actually it means that people feel that they're included on the team. There's not these cool kids and not cool kids, right?
In groups and out groups. Yeah.
That's right. That people feel like they could speak up without fear of retaliation.
Correct.
Being able to ask for help.
Yes. The vulnerability piece.
Vulnerability.
Yeah.
Willing to ask for help. And actually in Brene Brown's research, she's found that that was one of the number one indicators as a way to build trust when leaders, employees ask for help.
There was actually a hospital study that was done around the same time as Amy's work that was talking about the best performing team was the one that reported the most mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really interesting too.
Yeah, which is another one of the indicators of psych safety is the ability to name mistakes.
Yes.
Say I made a mistake, right? Because when we cover up mistakes, that's when actually some of the biggest mishaps for an organization can happen. When the biggest risk happens is when we don't name mistakes. The last one is being able to say new ideas. It is crucial for innovation.
Yeah.
But we have to be able to speak up and do that challenger safety. I'll go over the 4 stages of psych safety here in a minute, but we have to be able to challenge the status quo if we want to innovate. How many companies have innovation as a core value?
I think a lot of companies think they have innovation as a core value, but being able to create the environment in which innovation truly thrives is a conscious effort.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's leader driven.
What I find is the biggest barrier is people have to have a mindset of being willing to fail. They have to be willing to try new things. They have to be willing to spend time and resources on trying those new ideas. And they have to be willing to fail in order to learn and iterate. And I think that's a big piece that companies are missing, especially when we're so focused on these outcomes that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Innovation is not a suggestion box in the employee break room, right?
Yeah. So when we talk about psychological safety, there's really kind of 4 phases, if you will. And it doesn't mean that they happen necessarily in linear order, but I want to go into and break these down a little bit.
Yeah.
So that first one is inclusion safety. And for our leaders listening out there on the podcast, inclusion, it's not the big widespread efforts, that we've seen around DEI. It really is just, does everybody feel valued on my team? Can I recognize the strengths of people that are here? Do I ask everybody about their day? It really is just that basic that I do feel like we do so well here at Louisiana is just making sure, checking in on people. How are you? Are you seen? Are you included? That is such a big piece of psych safety.
I simply think about it as the fact that a third of my life is at work. So I'm going to have interaction and involvement with the people that I work with. I want to be involved in their lives and I want them to be involved in my life. To a certain extent, we want to be able to build that relationship, rapport, and trust because I do want to be able to show up authentically at work. And that includes some level of vulnerability.
Absolutely.
Yep. But that also allows them to know that, by me sharing a little bit of that, and I do this with any teams that I've ever led, right? I let them know it's a hard week for me. I don't need to go into the gory details,
That's right.
but it allows that opening, right? So I'm not stoic. It allows that opening that when they're having a hard week and they need a little bit more grace that they can come to me too, and it builds that trust.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we talk about in the vulnerability work is when leaders are vulnerable, it gives their teammates permission to do the same. And the leaders really set the tone for all of that and for psych safety. The second type of psych safety is really around that learner safety. When we talk about learning in organizations, that is the organization's ability to adapt, to grow, to continue to evolve and innovate. There's very few industries that operate the exact same now as they did 50 years ago. And you have to be able to remain agile and stay up to date. And so that learner safety is super important. Some of the indicators of, is it safe as a learner? Can I ask questions? Can I say I don't know? Can I bring new ideas without fear of being belittled or that it feeling like it's not my place? Are we allowed to make those mistakes? Are we allowed to try new things? Or is it, are we supported by our leaders to come up with new ideas and try new things? And you have a extensive background. You have decades in managing teams, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the things, and say a little bit about like the service industries that you've worked in and like the different environments you've been in. What are the things that you really saw that contributed to learner safety that made a difference in your teams?
I've been in situations where I've had to go ahead and take over stores or locations that were low performing, being given a goal by somebody higher than me, say, turn this store around, right? Like, we want it to be a performing store. We want it to be profitable, things like that, right? There's two schools of thought there because I've worked with many other managers in the industries, and most of them, if we were to go ahead and have a lunch or whatever, and they're saying, low performing store, low performing team, turn it over, right? Get rid of everybody, start fresh. That's really harsh. And it's not the way that I would want to operate. I wouldn't want my new boss to come in and then day one, I'm packing my bags. Like, that doesn't feel good for anybody. This person doesn't know me, but they have the authority to go ahead and control a very significant portion of my life, right? So whenever I've been in those situations, and we're talking like high turnover stores, like I ran a store that was $3.1 million and had like over a 20% shrink, which is just ridiculous. They were just pouring out money. The first thing we did is you go in and you listen.
Yes.
What are the problems, right? Like, what are the actual issues? It's not like the team doesn't know that there's a problem. They're very aware of it.
Yeah.
Right? So build that psychological safety first. Listen, build trust, build dependency, then bring in accountability.
Yeah.
Because I think if you have psychological safety, it runs along a continuum. And there's an interaction between psychological safety and accountability.
Absolutely.
So think low psychological safety, low accountability. What's that? That's apathy. So the team doesn't care and nobody's holding them accountable. They just exist. If you have low psychological safety and you have high accountability, demanding goals, we need to get this done, blah, 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 that's anxiety.
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
Having psychological safety, I mean, we talked about it. It's one of the cornerstones. You have to have it to have a high performing team. But what happens if you don't have accountability?
Yeah.
Right?
High safety, low accountability.
Comfort.
Yes.
Right? So not apathy, but comfort. And innovation actually dies because nobody's worried about changing the status quo or whatever, because nobody's trying to change anything. Nobody's trying to really reach a goal.
Right.
That learner state that you talked about comes from high psychological safety, high accountability.
That's right.
That's what creates that learner state. And that's what creates that space for innovation to grow, for teams to become more effective, for the processes, that structure, and then also for meaning and impact, right? If we have that, does it matter? Do we have impact? Do we have growth?
Right.
We do when we have those two things together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love how you laid that out, that chart of the 4 quadrants. And we can direct people in the show notes to find that information so that they can take and apply it for their teams. But that is absolutely one of the things that I find in my fractional chief leadership officer role when I'm working with a company, is to understand where are we on that continuum, right? Because that is going to impact every decision that we make along the way. What we see across industries, and every industry thinks that they're alone in this. And I promise you all, you are not alone. It shows up every industry. There's a huge gap between having high performers at that entry level and then that first bump up to supervisor, that first level of manager.
Yeah.
Huge gap in people skills. And they see that they get promoted because they're awesome at their job.
Yeah.
And then they drive people away.
Sure.
They don't know how to lead them.
Sure. Yeah, it happened to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happened to me.
I think everybody, but that's where that learner piece comes in, right? That high accountability, high safety.
Right.
So it takes a lot of intentional work on behalf of the leader to make sure that we are driving that state, not just for the team members on our teams, but overall as a company.
So when I first became a manager, I was so nervous about taking, in my mind, managing other people, taking care of other people, right?
Yeah.
I became a mother.
To your team members.
To my team members.
Okay, yes.
I became a mother. So I became that high psychological safety, low
Yeah.
accountability.
So then you had a bunch of people that felt
I was
comfortable.
very comfortable. My team was very comfortable for me. We were not making goals.
Yes.
Yeah.
And no, not holding them accountable.
No,
I'm
yeah.
guessing.
Yeah, my goal wasn't to get them to perform.
Mhm.
My goal was to get them to like me. What is that?
Especially
Right.
when you get promoted from your peers, right?
Absolutely.
That's such a tough transition to make.
It is. It is. And you think you're doing a good job
Mhm.
because your team loves you,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
And then when your boss comes to you and they're like, why isn't your department performing?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then how do you go back to that team if you haven't started
Mhm.
with incorporating that dependability in the roles, incorporating that structure,
Mhm.
incorporating some of those other things that we talked about, the clarity and accountability that get you there?
Yeah.
How can you then go back to your team and say, hey guys, I'm sorry, I know we were friends, but now we really need to do our work? Like, how much more difficult are you making that for yourself?
Right. And that accountability is one of the top requested workshops that we get,
It
or
is.
either through coaching or training for teams. And so, but that's another episode.
It probably is.
That is another episode. So the third stage is contributor safety. And this is where I'm really owning ideas. I'm speaking up. I'm bringing new thoughts. I am really actively participating. How many meetings do we sit in where, people may not speak up? They're, on their phone, they're distracted. When you have a highly engaged and motivated team and they feel safe with each other, they're going to be bringing those ideas, right? They're going to be able to share all of that. And then the fourth stage is challenger safety. This one can be extremely difficult to achieve. Challenger safety is when I can speak up against, I can challenge ideas, I can challenge the leader's ideas. And it's not that you're creating a riot on your team or in your company, right? That's not what we're talking about.
Right.
But it really is, can I understand what exists now? Can I speak up and bring these new ideas, or say, hey, that process may not be the best way to do it. Here's why. Here's what I'm offering instead. And being able to have that conflict around those task or process ideas. To really achieve this challenger safety, you have to be able to navigate conflict.
Absolutely. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so what we find, and that's totally another podcast too, but there's different types of conflict. And actually what we find is that when you can have task conflict and process conflict. So what are we doing and how are we doing it?
Yes.
Teams are actually more effective.
Oh, absolutely.
And they result in better decisions.
Because it's never personal. It's constructive conflict.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that goes hand in hand with that challenger safety. Yeah. So when you can have challenger safety and you can really engage in that dialogue around what do we need to challenge in order to change what we're doing, that's where innovation happens. That's where you get ahead of your competitors. Think about AI. Right?
Sure.
We're having those conversations and we're not challenging people and say, oh, that's not for us. We're not going to think about that. Yep. Well, it's infiltrating every industry. Okay. And so if we're not challenging that, right, and then there's no safety to do so, we're going to get stuck as a company. And we don't want to get left behind.
And even on teams too, the other thing to think about is when teams are forming and you do have psychological safety and you do have people that start creating shared mental models, right?
That's right.
You also have to think about, okay, so what is the interceptor between that and groupthink, right? Because we know that innovation also dies in groupthink.
That's right.
Right? So that challenger.
Say what groupthink is.
Okay, so groupthink is when you have a group that is not willing, able, or feeling safe enough, right, to be able to challenge status quo. And so when status quo, right, happens, it's the yes man in the room, the yes men's in the room, right? The leader says something and everybody else kind of follows along with whatever the leader says or with whatever the group consensus is.
Well, because it's what was put on the table.
Correct. And they have done countless studies on this. They'll have people in the room and there'll be a number on the board. Let's say the number on the board is 4. And you go down the line, right? And the first guy says it's 2. Next guy says it's 2. His next guy says, the guy at the end, number 6, 7, 8, or whatever, he can read. He knows it's 4, but because everybody else said it's 2, he's going to say it's 2, right?
Yeah.
And it's just that human nature to kind of conform within our society that you have to have an active interruption in that process in order to have something change.
What is the role of the leader, right? Because we're talking about all of this really great content in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
what is the role of leader in ensuring that safety is happening? How does a leader even know whether their team has psych safety or not?
I think what we just talked about is the leader willing to examine themselves and what their team is telling them, right? If your
Good
team,
start.
yeah, I think if your team is doing nothing but agreeing with you, right, and nobody's challenging you, then maybe the question you should be challenging yourself, why is that?
Yeah.
Is it because they like me? Is it because they're afraid of me? Right?
Right.
So, that those two things, low psych safety, right? Are they apathetic? Do they have anxiety?
Right.
Do we have too much comfort on the team? How do we get to that learner?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So as the leader, what are my behaviors that I could speak up and change or have vulnerability about, or whatever the case may be, that would then draw my people to say, okay, maybe I don't need to agree with you all the time to get by or to win favor or to, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Well, as a leader myself,
Sure.
right,
Yeah.
leading all of our LDI team, our amazing team, one of the things I appreciate the most is when I am given feedback that challenges my ideas.
Sure.
Right. And I invite that as much as I can.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I'm still responsible for the final decision.
Yeah.
I still have to make that decision. But I so appreciate when people do challenge me on what I'm thinking or the way that we're doing it, or maybe there's a better way.
You're not giving up authority or power by inviting ideas.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So you keep that.
Yes.
Like you said, you keep the final decision at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But more information is always good, right?
Yeah.
So just because I have one way of looking at something, if I get new information.
Yeah. Could we just repeat that for our leaders out there?
Yeah.
You're not giving up power and authority by creating a safe space for people. You still get to keep all of your responsibility at the end of the day.
Yes.
But it can make you a more effective leader when we have more information and we actually listen to our teams and they feel safe enough to give us that feedback.
Absolutely.
So what's the biggest thing that you want leaders listening to this to take away today?
Team effectiveness is not about individual capability. It is about how teams interact and about their interaction with the leader. So what the team has, what the team does, what the team becomes determines your outcomes and determines what your team achieves.
And that's one thing that I love about what we do, and the unique aspect of LDI is that we have access to all of this research that we infuse into our leadership development practices. So there are ways that we can help you measure psych safety. We can help you actually in a validated way see where is your team and actually design interventions to help increase that for your team, which makes you an effective leader,
It does. Absolutely does.
Well, thank you for having this conversation with me.
I'm so happy to be here.
One of my favorite topics. It is absolutely something that makes a difference for teams. And, I coach leaders through it all the time.
Yeah.
We all do at LDI. Really, really big impact. And so thank you all for listening to another episode of Teams That Win. If you want to partner with LSU, send us an email at ldi@lsu.edu. Now, let's go lead.